Well, it's been only a month since the final gavel fell at the Copenhagen Climate Summit, with exhausted delegates taking note, so to speak, of the gathering's only real outcome, the Copenhagen Accord. Well, today, the UN's climate chief held his first news conference since that day and said that accord, despite criticism from environmental groups, can reinvigorate the larger treaty process. Our executive editor, Margaret Ryan, is here now with more. Margaret.
Hi, Susan. Well, De Boer said cooler heads are already seeing the opportunity in the accord. He pointed out developed and major developing countries publicly pledged emission reductions even without a new treaty, and developed nations pledged nearly $30 billion in adaptation aid for the most vulnerable poor countries in the next 3 years. Now, he said the Copenhagen meeting didn't bake the cake, as he put it, for a treaty, but it provided all the ingredients for the next climate conference to do so. Now, that meeting will be in Mexico City at the end of the year. De Boer says he's meeting next month with Mexico's President, Felipe Calderón, about plans for that conference. And he says he's already heard from countries whose negotiators want more interim negotiating sessions, more than just the single one that's planned at the end of May, all in hopes that some of the issues that tied up the Copenhagen meeting can indeed be resolved. Now, he was asked whether the loss of the Massachusetts Senate seat in the United States would make a difference in the U.S. position in the talks.
The change of one state from one party to another is not going to cause a landslide in the politics of the United States on the question of climate change. I think that the U.S., through both the Democrats and the Republicans, is firmly committed to a climate change agenda. The question, of course, is how domestically that agenda will pan out. Will it be through cap and trade or not? Will it be through Environmental Protection Agency regulation or by some other route? But whatever route is taken, the President of the United States committed to a 17% emission reduction in Copenhagen. The President of the United States committed to more ambitious emission reductions for 2030 and 2050. And it is those statements to which the international community will hold the government of the United States accountable.
Now, De Boer spoke as climate advocates are reeling from the revelation that a much-repeated assertion from the last report of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was false. The IPCC head has admitted that a prediction that the world's glaciers could disappear by 2035 had no scientific basis. Now, today, two climate scientists defended the report's larger conclusions. They said trends from all branches of climate science and thousands of scientists are real and unambiguous in showing the globe is warming. And they shouldn't be disregarded, the scientists said, because one error slipped in.
I think one of the problems is in reading an IPCC document as a legal document rather than a scientific document. It seems to me there are people who would like to interpret IPCC reports in some strict legalistic sense, imagining that every word is perfect and there are absolutely no errors in it, and if there are any errors, then those errors are evidence of some malfeasance on the part of scientists.
Now, Santer added that young scientists are hesitating to enter the climate field because of the increasing personal attacks on scientists.
And what we've seen really since the second assessment report of the IPCC is some kind of loss of innocence in our field. That, 14, 15 years ago, it was possible to do science and really not be too worried about being the subject of congressional investigations, Freedom of Information Act requests, very personal and very public attacks. Those innocent days are over now.
Now, one point, De Boer's press conference was open to reporters from all around the globe, and no one asked him about the adequacy of climate science. So, Susan, there's no sign that these questions are stopping the international climate treaty process at all.
Or was there any sign that the treaty process or the UNFCCC process might change? There was some talk after, so many people called Copenhagen a failure, that it was the process at fault.
Well, De Boer said, of course you can't get 192 people all in one room to make every single decision, but he said the UN process has always been working groups. And he said it was the process that brought people together in all those global leaders together. He really saw it as kind of an accomplishment that there were 120 leaders from around the globe in Copenhagen. He said that really that's never happened before, not for a treaty like this. And they were there, to make the final decisions, to sign on and to elevate the importance of the climate negotiations. So he actually seemed to be quite encouraged by that, even if Copenhagen didn't get to a final decision.
Right. Now, is Mexico City being seen as ambitious a gathering as this one was?
I get the sense, talking to people, that they're afraid to pump up the expectations quite that far. I mean, Copenhagen, so many people were just so focused on that, and it was going to do everything, and it didn't.
Maybe more emphasis this time around on the bilateral talks, the G talks, and other.
And those were obviously the more productive things. They're the ones that got the process anywhere. De Boer was very specific. He said he'd been talking to negotiators. He said nobody wants the Copenhagen Accord to become a third negotiating track. You remember there are 2 tracks already: the extension of the Kyoto Protocol and the long-term cooperative arrangements, which is everything outside of the Kyoto Protocol. And there was a hope for Copenhagen that this could all be brought together into one document. That didn't happen. It turned out a lot of the developing countries are extremely attached to the Kyoto Protocol, and they weren't going to give it up.
Right.
So there was some talk about, does this Copenhagen Accord make a third track? And he said no, it just supports the 2 that are there, and that's how the negotiations are going to go forward.
We shall see. All right, Margaret Ryan, thank you.